Masechet Yevamot, Daf Kof Yod Zayin. We're going to see 3 Mishnayot today. We've been speaking about the fact that a woman is believed to say that a man is dead so that the wife can remarry. And even if it's the wife herself, she says, my husband died. In most cases, she will be believed that the husband is dead, and the court will allow her to remarry. And this next Mishnah is going to talk about the monetary aspect. Is she also believed to collect her ketubah or other matters of inheritance? So we have a machloket. Bet Shammai omarim tinaseh v'titol ketubata. If a wife says, my husband has died, we believe her, and she can not only remarry, she can also collect her ketubah. They come together. Bet Hillel omrim tinaseh ve'lo titol ketubata. Bet Hillel says, yes, she can remarry, but she cannot collect her ketubah because this is a monetary item, and a monetary item you have to bring full proof before you can extract the money from someone else. So they separate the prohibition aspect from the monetary aspect. Amru lahen Bet Shammai hitatem adva hamura ve'lo natir mamon hakal. Bet Shammai says, akal v'chomer, if you permit adayot, which is more stringent, that's a very serious prohibition. It would be eshet ish if she goes and marries someone else and her husband is alive. So if we're going to believe her testimony for eshet ish, all the more so we should believe her regarding monetary matters, which is much more lenient. So Bet Shammai has a good point. Amru lehen Bet Hillel masinu she'en hachin nichnasina nachala al piha. But Bet Hillel says, yeah, but on the other hand, we do see that she is not believed regarding monetary matters for inheritance. For example, if the husband dies, let's say without children, and then the brothers inherit, they're the next of kin. Then brothers do not inherit based on her testimony. If the brothers want to take the money, take the inheritance, they have to come up with full proof like any normal monetary case. The point is that there's a difference between Erva and Mammon. Even though Erva is more chamor, the wife will check herself. She's going to go investigate because she'll end up being in a difficult situation if she remarries and the husband is in fact alive. So we assume that she'll do her investigation in terms of that. That's why we are lenient regarding Erva, so that she won't be an aguna. But regarding monetary matters, it's completely separate. And just like we do not believe her for brothers to inherit, also we will not believe her for her to collect the ketuvah. Because that's something that she just benefits from, and so maybe she will not be so exacting in checking it out in terms of that. Okay, Amru lahem Bet Shammai v'alo misefer ketubah nilmod shu kotev la shim tinasi lacher titeli ma shekatav lichi. Bet Shammai counter and say, no, there's no way to separate the monetary and the prohibition aspect for her, right? Even if it's true that the brothers have to come and bring proof to collect the money. But in terms of her, we cannot separate them because it says in the scroll of the ketubah itself, this is an interesting phrase, sefer ketubah. You don't usually think of a ketubah as a sefer, but maybe he means here a text of a ketubah. Oh, we're going to see the significance of this in a minute. We can learn from the ketubah, the text of the ketubah itself, because he writes and he guarantees, this is a legal document, and he, at the beginning of the marriage, the husband says, if you marry someone else, you can collect what is written here in the ketubah. In other words, the collection of the ketubah is made dependent on her ability to remarry. So therefore, she does not need to bring normal full proof in order to collect her ketubah from his estate, because there's a condition built in where if she can remarry, then and that condition is fulfilled because we do believe her according to everyone for that, then she can also collect the ketubah. And so therefore, Bet Shammai makes sense. Or after all, if she's going to double check to make sure that her husband is really dead so she can remarry, so that she won't be in a difficult situation, so then we're believing her for that, so we can believe her for the ketubah as well. They are dependent on each other. And Bet Hillel said, you know what, you're right, you have a good point. And they ended up changing their minds and agreeing with Bet Shammai that she can collect her ketubah. Good. Amar Rav Chisda, Nityabema Yevama Hanichnas Nachala Al Piha. Rav Chisda now is going to extend this permission and say not only can she collect the ketubah, if she does yibum, then the yavam, her yavama means her yavam, can inherit the deceased. Right? That's generally what happens. Even though according to the Peshat of the Torah, the son that's born inherits the deceased father, but the rabbis made a midrash and said that it's the yavam, the brother, who inherits. And so if a wife says, my husband has died, and they have no children, and she has to do yibum, so based on her testimony, we allow her to do yibum, and we allow the husband, her husband, her yavam, to take the inheritance. Hem darshu midrash ketubah, anu lo nidrosh midrash Torah. After all, they, meaning in the Mishnah, Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel agreed with it in the end. They derived an interpretation, they made a legal interpretation of the language of the ketubah. Anu lo nidrosh midrash Torah. So we certainly have permission to make a legal derivation from the words of the Torah itself. The Torah says, Yakum al Shem Achiv Amar Chamana Vaharekam. Torah says that the brother who's alive, whose brother has died, he will uphold the name of his brother, and we said that means that the yavam inherits the deceased. So Vaharekam. If there is any situation where you can do yibum and he does marry her, then automatically he has a right to inherit. You can't tell him you have to marry her, but you don't get the inheritance. They come together. So just like the wife getting her ketubah comes together, and that was something we derived from the language of the ketubah, so too, all the more so, you should be able to derive something from the language of the Torah itself. Okay, so this is actually very interesting. Usually the word derasha, midrash, is a technical term. Regarding legal midrash, it means deriving something from the Torah only. We only do this for the Torah. It has that status of legal authority that we derive from words and phrases and parallels. Doubles, we learn all kinds of laws from it. It's a legal document. But generally, we only apply it to Torah. Not even for Nevi'im and Ketuvim. We don't make legal derashot. Yet here, we are using a midrash, a legal derivation from the language of a ketubah, which is not prophetic word, does not have the prophetic status of the Torah, and yet uses the word midrash. So that's interesting, perhaps because it's a legal term. And so anything that is a contract, and the Torah in a way is a contract, it's the contract of the Berit between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Bnei Israel, and it is actually likened to a ketubah, like every marriage ceremony between a man and woman has a ketubah, so too the rabbis think of the Torah itself as the ketubah between the marriage between Bnei Israel and the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So there is an interesting parallel, and so within a legal framework, it's one can make derivations based on the words in a legal document. All right. Amar Rav Nachman, bat lebetin ve'amra, met ba'ali v'hatiruni lihinaseh. Now we want to analyze the language of her claim when she comes to Bet Din, and if she says, my husband has died, please permit me to marry. That's her, right? She has a claim and a request. In that case, according to Bet Shammai, and Bet Hillel agreed also, we permit her to remarry, and we give her a ketubah, as we argued, right? They go together. Tenu li ketubati af litnaseh en matirin la. But if she comes to court and says, my husband has died, pay me my ketubah, then we do not pay her ketubah, and we also do not permit her to get married. Because now it's clear that she's coming because she wants to collect money. And for collecting money, then you have to bring regular, normal proof in order to extract money. We see that's her main goal, not because she's an aguna and she wants to get remarried. So we see her primary motivation is monetary, so we do not believe her. Good. Now, a couple of questions. She comes to court and says, both. My husband has died. please allow me to get married and pay the ketubah. How about that? On the one hand, since she mentioned the ketubah, that means she has in mind she wants payment, so she has ulterior motives, and we cannot believe her. Or she's coming to court and she's listing all of her claims. That's what you do when you come to court, right? I have two different claims, and so her primary motivation may very well be to marry, but she wants to make sure that they have on the list that they're going to take care of the ketuvah matters, and so we should believe her. And if you say, yes, we would pay her in that case, because she's just mentioning everything, what if she switches the order and says, Tinuli ketubati vehatilul mahu? She says, pay my ketuvah and permit me to get married. Does that matter? Do we say, since she mentioned the ketubah first, oh, that means she has ulterior motives. She really wants the money, so we cannot trust her testimony? Or or maybe she doesn't know in what the process through which she can be permitted to marry. She thinks, which would make sense, that they go together, that she has to get her ketuvah and then she can remarry, because that's usually what happens if there's a divorce or a death, and she would get her ketuvah and then she would be able to get married. So she thinks, she has in mind that she really wants to marry, but she thinks that she has to get the ketubah first and then get married. That's why she mentioned the ketubah first, not because that's her primary motivation. And she doesn't know that actually you could separate the two. It could be that she can get permission to get remarried, and maybe she won't get the ketubah. There are many cases like that as well. So all these questions are left in abeyance. Next Mishnah teaches, Hakol ne'emanin lahadi'ah, laha'ida, חוץ מחמותה ובת חמותה ושרתה ויבימתה ובת בעלה. Any woman is believed if she comes and says, I saw your husband died. She is trusted so that this wife can get remarried, except for the following 5 people that are actually close relations, but for one reason or another we suspect them of hating this wife, and they may purposely lie to get her in trouble. For example, the wife's mother-in-law. In other words, the husband's mother. If the husband's mother comes and says to her daughter-in-law, oh, your husband died, my son has died, she is not trusted, because often, I've never seen this, but mother-in-laws do not get along with their daughter-in-laws, and therefore, if they give this testimony, she will go ahead and remarry someone else, and then the husband will come back, and then she will be prohibited to her husband forever. That's a way of getting rid of her. Also, bat chamota, the mother-in-law's daughter, meaning the wife's husband's sister. Vesarata, or a co-wife. Co-wives are always in competition. So if one co-wife comes and says, oh, our husband died, so she's believed for herself. The co-wife who testified can go get remarried, but we do not accept her testimony for her co-wife, because maybe she's just saying that the co-wife who's testifying is not won't remarry because she knows it's a lie, but she's hoping that her co-wife will remarry, and then the husband will come back, and then she'll be out of the picture. It's a good way of getting rid of someone. Vivimta, and also her sister-in-law, through her, that's her husband's brother, that's her yavam, her wife. The reason, because that sister-in-law says, well, you know what, if her husband dies without children, this wife is going to end up being my co-wife. I want to make sure that doesn't happen. So she may testify that her own brother-in-law died, so that the wife, her sister-in-law, will remarry and then be prohibited from being together and from doing yibum. Ubat ba'ala, and also her husband's daughter. That would be her stepdaughter. So stepdaughters often won't like their stepmothers, so the stepdaughter might come and say, oh, your husband died. My own father died from a different marriage, died because to get rid of her stepmother. Okay, so that's the 5 relations mentioned in the Mishnah. We're going to see there's 2 ways to understand them, either because it's kind of natural hatred that develops in many families. The other one is going to be for financial reasons in terms of inheritance. This woman being around is going to drain the inheritance that these other people feel like they contributed to or deserve to get better. Now, last question of Mishnah. Ma ben get lemita shekatav mochiach. All these 5 women are believed regarding a get. A get, if it's sent by a messenger, so you need the messenger to say, yes, I saw it, it was signed in front of me. They have to testify that this is a valid get. And anyone can do this, a woman also, and even these 5 relatives are believed if they say this to validate a get. Why? How come they're believed to validate a get? Maybe they would rely in that case also to make so that the wife will think she's divorced, remarry, and then have a problem. The reason is because she has a get. So the get will prove the accuracy of her testimony and show that she's really she's true. All right, the Gemara is now going to ask about a couple of more cases besides these 5 that are mentioned. We do have a chart here, but I think the chart is more confusing than just keeping the people in mind. I'm not going to use it. So we have we mentioned that the sister-in-law is no good. So imagine a man has 2 half-sisters, one from his father and one from his mother, and he also has a wife. So this wife has 2 sister-in-laws. Now, Ibayalehu bat chami hamahu. The Mishnah mentioned bat hamota. That would be his mother-in-law's daughter. That is mentioned in the Mishnah. But what about her father-in-law's daughter? That's also a sister-in-law. If she came and testified that her husband died, that would be her brother, would we believe her? Ta'ama debat chamota mishum dika ima de sanyala, haname sanyala. So is the reason why a sister-in-law is not believed, is that because her mother, the mother-in-law, the reason for a sister-in-law is because she has a mother, and the mother, that's the wife's mother-in-law, is going to hate her daughter-in-law, and so therefore the mother will affect the daughter and talk to her and say, oh, see what a terrible thing, see what she did, and that's why. But here, where her father-in-law's daughter does not have a mother. I mean, she has a mother, but the mother is not the mother-in-law. So that the mother will not affect, and the father-in-law is generally like their daughters-in-law, and so we don't have to worry about that. So there is no mother who will affect her badly, and therefore be permitted. Or maybe the reason, the reason why a mother-in-law's daughter is not believed is because she is thinking to herself, this wife is eating the food that my mother prepares. In other words, my mother brought money into the marriage. She's working in the household, increasing its value, and then eventually, when the father dies, then that will be inherited by the son and not by the daughter, and so the son's wife will benefit. So that's why she hates her sister-in-law. Well, that would be true either way, even if it was the father-in-law's daughter. That's also her brother's half-sister. She will make the same claim then and say that this wife is eating my father's house. In other words, when the father dies, eventually the daughter will not inherit, the son will inherit, and the wife will benefit from the inheritance and not her, so they'd rather the wife be out of the picture. According to that, it would make no difference. Both half-sisters would be equally untrustworthy. All right, that's the question. Tashamak, let's see if we can answer it. Hakol ne'emanin laha'ida chutz me'chamesh nashim v'mita shitavyan. The Mishnah itself says only 5 women are not believed, and if you would include, and it mentioned the mother-in-law's daughter, and if it was true that father-in-law's daughter also is not believed, then it should say 6, and it doesn't include her. So therefore, we believe her. No. Dilma tama debat chamota damra ka'achla legirsena de ben ashai la shena bat chamota la shena bat chamiha. No, that's not a proof, because maybe the reason why we don't trust the mother-in-law's daughter is because she says she's going to eat the household and inherit, and so therefore that would make no difference. It's true, the Mishnah does not mention it, but it's the same reasoning. So Mishnah just happened to mention one example, but same would be true for a father-in-law's daughter, and therefore maybe it's prohibited as well. So you know what, there's really no proof from the Mishnah. Okay, now we have a problem. V'hanan tenan, this is not really a baraita, it's a Mishnah, it's a baraita, so we could change it to Tanya. V'hanan tanyan, Vanan Tanya, chutz misheva nashim. We have a baraita that says all women are believed except for 7 women who are not believed. So here it says 7. And so therefore we can include more, right? We have to include more. There's 2 more besides that in the Mishnah. So maybe one of those extra 2, besides the 5 there in Mishnah, one of the extra 2 is in fact a father-in-law's daughter, and she would therefore not be believed. So we answer, Hahi de biyudahi de tanya, de biyudah mosif af eshet av hakala. No, that baraita we know is the opinion of the biyudah. He adds 2 other women. That's eshet av, meaning a stepmother, right? The wife's the wife that is being testified about, her father's wife, that's her stepmother, and a kala and a daughter-in-law. The Mishnah mentioned the opposite of these cases. The Mishnah said that a stepdaughter is not believed about her stepmother, but Rabbi Yehuda adds the other way around also. A stepmother also will hate and not be believed regarding her stepdaughter if she says that her husband died. And kala, daughter-in-law. The Mishnah mentioned mother-in-law. A mother-in-law hates her daughter-in-law, and therefore we don't accept the testimony of a mother-in-law if she says that her daughter-in-law's husband died. But now the Biyudah adds the other way around, that the daughter-in-law also hates the mother-in-law, and therefore we do not trust the testimony of a daughter-in-law if she says that her mother-in-law's husband died, which is her father-in-law. Okay, Amru lo. The rabbi said to the Biyudah, Eshet av harehi bichlal batabal, kala hare bichlal chamota. The rabbi said it's the same thing. Those 2 are already included. The father's wife, the stepmother, is included in the stepdaughter, and daughter-in-law is included in mother-in-law, because usually when A hates B, B is going to end up hating A as well. So these kinds of things are automatically reciprocal, so we don't have to include them. They're already included in the 5. So how come the Biyudah does say no, there's 7? If after all I actually agree, how come he doesn't say there's just 5 and those are automatically included with the same logic? Because he'll say, it makes sense that a mother-in-law will hate the daughter-in-law, because the mother-in-law will say, she's going to end up eating the food that I prepare, meaning I'm going to work and I brought in money into this marriage, and my husband's going to die, and she's going to be the beneficiary. So that's why she hates him. She hates her. But a daughter-in-law has no financial reason to hate her mother-in-law. That's why you can't include it. It's not the same logic. So that's why he added this one. Bishlama batabal sanya le'eshet ha'ab damra kachla legirsene de'em. And similarly, regarding the stepdaughter, hates the stepmother because she says this wife, my father's wife, is eating all my father's estate, which otherwise would go to a son, or maybe to her if there was no son. So she's upset that the stepdaughter is taking these finances, that the stepmother is taking the finances. Ela eshet ha'av ma'tamad sanya lebatabal. But what reason would a stepmother have for hating her stepdaughter? So that's why he had to say, oh, you know what? These also are prohibited. So ela may mosif tarteh. Well, if the logic does not apply both ways, then why does the Biyudah include these 2 cases? Why would they hate them? So the answer is they wouldn't hate them for the same financial reasons, but for other reasons. Ela kala ma'tamad sanya. Why does the daughter-in-law hate her mother-in-law? Because the mother-in-law will tell the son all the negative things that the wife is doing. Right? And maybe when the husband goes off to work, and the mother-in-law will see what the daughter-in-law is doing right and doing wrong, and then when the son comes home, tell her, you know what your wife did, this and that. So daughter-in-laws don't like that. And a stepmother also hates the her stepdaughter, because the stepdaughter will reveal to her father all the negative things about the stepmother. And so it's not for financial reasons, but rather other personal reasons. That's why the Biyudah adds those 2, and they have to be mentioned as all 7 because they're for different reasons. Rabbanan, and how come the Rabbanan, who they agree that it works reciprocally, they're both prohibited, How come they include those two within the five? So they say, Kamayim hapanim lapanim ken leba adam la adam. They quote the pasuk in Mishleh, like water, as in water, face answers to face, so the heart of man to man. In other words, everything is reflective. If A hates B, then B is necessarily going to hate A. So even though you're right, the financial reason, their old financial reason only works one way, but once that triggers it, then the hatred will be turned back the other way. Therefore, we cannot trust either one to testify about the other, mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, or stepmother, daughter. Okay, what does Yehuda do with that pasuk? Is that's talking about Torah. They're saying that the Torah is a reflection of yourself. You see yourself in the Torah that you learn. The more you put into the study of Torah, then the more that will be reflected upon you, the more you will get out of it. All right, so that's the two opinions about how we count the the women who are not believed. We end this discussion of this Mishnah with one more question regarding a potential mother-in-law. In Eretz Yisrael, they asked the following question: if you have a mother-in-law who is coming afterwards, what is the law regarding her? So this would be a case of her Yavam's mother. As follows: a woman is married to a man, they don't have children, and that man has a brother. Now, if her husband should die without children, then she'll end up doing yibum with her brother-in-law, and then her brothers, assuming those two brothers have different mothers. So her current mother-in-law is not the same as her potential mother-in-law if her husband should die, and she'll end up marrying her brother-in-law. So that is a potential mother-in-law. What if, while they're married, while everybody's alive, that mother-in-law comes and says that your husband has died and he really didn't, and that way she'll do yibum and the husband will come back and then she'll have to leave altogether, right? Does she have in mind that this may happen and the mother-in-law already hates her potential daughter-in-law, right? If that only may happen should the person actually die. Does she have in mind that maybe my stepson will die and then his wife will end up being the Yevamot to my son, and I already hate her from that, so I better lie so that this potential will not happen. Does the hatred go to that extent? So we'll try to answer it from a different case, but it has a similarity. Tashima Amra, met ba'ali v'achar kach met hami. If a woman goes away on a trip with her husband and with her father-in-law, and she comes back from the trip alone, and she says, my husband died, and after that, my father-in-law died. Tina sevititol ketubah, she is trusted regarding her own husband, so she can remarry and take a ketubah. But her mother-in-law, who stayed home, is not trusted because her daughter-in-law and mother and daughter-in-law is not trusted regarding a mother-in-law. Now, ma'itama chamota asura, lav mishum damrinan, lo ba'ala, mayit velo hamiha mayit v'hadeka amra hachi lekilkula lechamotahu deka michavena. Why wouldn't we believe her? Because we suspect maybe nobody died, in fact, and she's just saying this so that the mother-in-law will go get remarried, and then they'll all come back, and then she'll be prohibited to ever come back into the family, and that's why she's doing that. Now, sevara lebatar sha'ata la tete tista'aran. She reasons later when the husbands come back, then my mother-in-law will be in trouble, and she will have to and she'll never trouble me again because she'll be out of the picture. So here, what's the point? Even though she was away on a trip, and while she was away on a trip, her mother-in-law wasn't with her, and so therefore her mother-in-law was not bothering her. Nevertheless, the potential that when she comes back from her trip, then the mother-in-law will start bothering her again is sufficient. So you see that a person does think about the potential and will lie in order to get rid of the potential even now, and therefore in the case that we asked about, yes, we would worry about it and we would not believe even a potential mother-in-law to testify about her potential daughter-in-law's husband. And then we answer, no, Dilma Shanahatam Deregish La Sada. No, in this case it's different here because they were already married and they already were living in the same place. And so this daughter-in-law already felt the oppression of her mother-in-law. So that's why when she went away, even though while she was away, she may not have felt it, she already experienced it, already is traumatized, and therefore we suspect that she may lie in order to not have that again. Whereas the mother of the Yavam, who they were never had hatred because she was never her mother-in-law yet, to that extent, a person is not going to plan ahead just in case she becomes my daughter-in-law, and then I will hate her. Now I'm going to already lie from now. No, we don't have to worry about the hatred going to such an extent. The last Mishnah for today talks about the relative values of one witness versus two witnesses should they contradict each other. We have as follows: Ed Omer Met Veniset. One witness came and said, I saw your husband dead. We believe him, and she remarries. Uba Ehad ve'amar lo met. And then one witness comes and says, no, he did not die. Hadeze azo lo teseh. She does not have to get divorced because it's one against one, and she can rely on the initial one. The next one that comes does not carry enough weight to release the previous one. But it sounds, from the fact that it says lo tetzeh, it sounds like if she was not married, she cannot then marry. There's one against one. Don't get married ab initio. Now, but the Gemara will talk about that. Next case. Ed omer met, ushnaim omrim lo met. One witness says that she can, the husband died. And then two come and say, no, he did not die. Well, two is certainly greater than one. Even if she already married in between, based on the testimony of one, she has to leave her husband because two male kosher witnesses are like 100%. Third case, Shanaim Omri met, Ve'ed Omer lo met. Two people said he died. Then one witness comes and says, no, he didn't die. Even if she didn't get married yet, she can marry again because the two witnesses are like 100%, and one witness is counted as 0 against the two witnesses. So we ignore the one witness who says he didn't die, and we go with the two witnesses who said he did. All right. Now, question about the first case. Tama deniset, haloniset, lo tinaseh. It sounds like when there's one and one, the only reason why we say don't leave is because she already married. One witness came and said, your husband dead. She married. One witness came and says, no, your husband is still alive, so she doesn't have to leave, only because she was already married. B'di avad. She should not get married after the second contradictory witness came. Hold on, is that true? Ula has a principle that says anytime the Torah said you can rely on one witness, interestingly here it says it's a Torah principle. That's important because way back in the 10th Perek, we were discussing, is this Doraita, Rabbanan? Okay, so anytime the Torah says you can rely on one witness, we consider it like two, to the extent that if one more comes, we will ignore the one who contradicts it. Now, you're not going to contradict an actual two that comes, but if it's really one, then the first one that comes that says your husband died, we count it as like two, more powerful, and the second one that comes, we count as only one and ignore him, which means she could even get married lecha techila in that case. So Hachikama says, you're right, we're going to agree with Ula and reinterpret the Mishnah as follows. Ed Ehad Omer Met. V'tiru lenaseh. If one witness comes and says, the husband died, and not only if she got married, even if the court just said, okay, you're permitted to get married. They processed it and said you can get married. And then one witness came and says, no, your husband did not die. She does not leave. What do you mean she does not leave? She doesn't marry yet. It means she does not leave. The permission that was granted her, the permission that the court gave her stays, and she can go ahead and get married after that. So it does sound like the court has to process the first witness. If they show up in line back to back, and the court didn't yet process it, then you have to wait. But once the court processed the first witness and they gave her a slip of paper saying you can go remarry, that's it. She keeps it, and the second witness will not undo that one. So this Ula's interpretation is significantly more lenient than the simple reading of the Mishnah. Next case. Ayed Omer Met. one witness says you died, and then two witnesses say, no, your husband's still alive, then she has to even get divorced, even if she's already married. She has to leave that husband, even if she's already married. Pishita, isn't that obvious? Then there's no way we're going to trust one witness against two. So you're right, for sure, if it was two kosher witnesses. Why is the Mishnah mentioning it? Mishnah wants to include another case, even though it didn't say explicitly, of two disqualified witnesses. Maybe two people who are relatives or two gamblers, and even though generally they're not the best testimony, it's worth something. And this would follow the principle of Rabbi Nechemia. Detanya Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Kol makom sheminat Torah aid echad, halech echadov de'ot. Whenever the Torah says you can trust one witness, so then you have to follow the majority of the witnesses. You see, when it comes to two witnesses of kosher male witnesses, there 2 is the same as 100. 2 is already 100% proof, and you're not going to go if it's 2 against 100, that will be equal. But when it comes to disqualified witnesses, and one witness is an example of a disqualified witness, because usually one is not believed, but we believe him. In whenever any case where you can believe one witness, you can also believe disqualified witnesses, and in those cases you'll follow the majority. And in such a case, two women, that's an example of a disqualified witness, that contradict one man will win. The two women will win. Just like two men will win against one man. Two men, even if they're kosher, will win against one man. And here, disqualified witnesses, we follow the majority. And so that's what the Mishnah was teaching. If one witness says the husband died, and two disqualified witnesses come and say no, for example, even if they're a woman or relatives, then we accept the majority, and she would have to leave her second husband. Okay, that's all one version. Or another version, this is almost the same, except it's going to distinguish women and other types of disqualified witnesses and say they're different categories, and women's testimony is actually worth slightly less than other male disqualified witnesses. If in fact there was one kosher witness that came to begin with, who was male kosher witness, then even 100 women that come afterwards would be equal to that one, and so would not undo it. But rather, our Mishnah is talking about a case where the first witness that came was a woman, who we do believe to say a man is dead, and after that, 2 women came and said, no, he's actually alive. So that's what we're talking about. Only in that case would the 2 override the 1, because they're all women, so 2 women override 1 woman. If in fact it was 1 man that came at first to say the husband's dead, then we would not override it for the testimony of 2 women, but we would override it for the testimony of 2 disqualified other witnesses. Okay. That the statement that Rabbi Nechemia said, we have to modify in this version. Rabbi Nechemia Omer, yes, whenever the Torah trusts one witness, we follow majority. Disqualified witnesses, we go by the majority, unlike 2 kosher witnesses where that's equal to 100. And therefore, we separate the genders. 2 women against 1 woman, 2 women will win. Just like 2 men will win against 1 man. But if you try to mix them, then 2 women versus 1 man is like half and half, and in that case, you do not follow the majority. All right, last point. Shenayim omerim. The last case of the Mishnah, where 2 witnesses says he died, 1 witness comes and says, no, he did not die. We ignore that 1 witness because we already have 200% witnesses. So, my kamash malan, isn't this obvious? What is this trying to teach us? Oh, this also bipsule aidut ukaribi Nechemia, as teaching us that the 2 witnesses that came first were in fact invalid witnesses. They were both gamblers. And one more witness, a single witness came and said he's still alive. We still trust the first 2, even though they were disqualified. Dazil batarov deot hainuhach. Wait, is that what you're teaching? That we follow the majority when it comes to disqualified witnesses? That's the same as what we learned in the second case. What's the point of bringing it again in the third case? Because I might have thought that when he made his principle that we follow the majority, that's only for stringency, so that we tell her, no, you can't get married. But here, we're following it for leniency, to say we follow the majority who said that the husband is dead, and not the minority who said that the husband is still alive. So we follow the majority of disqualified witnesses, even the kula. That's why we have the third case. This is a good example of the Gemara kind of treating the Mishnah almost like it's these are Pisukim, and it can't just give another case because it wants to fill out all the cases, but rather each case must be teaching something significant, something new. And so by understanding Mishnah that way, we can clarify all of these further matters. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.